Okay, we good? Awesome. All right, good morning, everyone. It is 8:30. It is May the 12th, 2020, day 30 or 60 or 90 or whatever of coronavirus. We have an agenda before us. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Councillor Christie.
I'll move the agenda as presented.
All righty, motion's been made to adopt the agenda as presented. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. We have pre-circulated the minutes of the April 28th, 2020 meeting. Are there any errors, omissions? Councillor King.
I'd make the motion to accept the council minutes from April 28th as presented.
Thank you. Motion's been made to adopt the minutes as presented. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Our first order of business is BDO financial statements. Welcome, Alan.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks.
So
See ya.
Welcome to this new world of COVID. Hope everyone's doing okay, safe. Like I think Mitch said before, I just don't like looking at myself on the screen anymore, but kind of get used to these meetings. They're working well. So today we're going to do our normal, well, sort of normal presentation to you guys. We're going to go, Mitch is going to step in here a second and go over the financial statements at a high level. But basically, I just want to encourage you guys to ask questions as we go, things like that. So unless there's initial questions right now, I can pass it over to Mitch and he's going to kind of go over things at a high level. No questions, so take it away, Mitch.
So I'm just going to run you guys essentially at the top, all the way bottom of the financial statements here. So starting from the top, we have audited the financial statements of Kneehill County as at December 31st, 2019. The financial statements are prepared fairly in all material respects. In our opinion, the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects. So in other words, we're issuing a clean audit opinion. So the basis for our opinion, we conducted our audit in accordance with Canadian generally accepted auditing standards. We are independent of Kneehill County and we have fulfilled our ethical responsibilities in accordance with these requirements. So moving down to the next point here, we have the emphasis of matter. This might be a little bit different than what some of you guys are used to seeing.
Yeah, I'll jump in there, Mitch.
Yeah,
and that's what matters is just drawing our attention to, and you guys have it in your package, there is a prior period adjustment this year. Relates to the Torrington Arena. Mitch, if you want to maybe jump to note 1, we can kind of just quickly go through that. Essentially what this was is that back in 1998, the Torrington was amalgamated to Kneehill County. There was an arena there that over the years we initially thought that the Ag Society had control over it, but just recently we discovered that the county actually has control over this arena. It actually has a lease with the Ag Society. The adjustment itself is really just an equity adjustment. What it is essentially we take the net book value of the asset, which is as of the end of the year, $776,000. That gets added to the capital assets, and the offset is to the accumulated surplus and tangible capital assets. So it's really not much more than a balance sheet adjustment. But it was up to a point where we felt we needed to adjust it on the statements itself. The only real adjustment for the current year is about $64,000 worth of amortization. You know, these things, way back in the day when we did tangible capital assets, you know, this one was missed in that whole process, and it's not uncommon when you basically have other societies on an operational basis, you know, looking and acting like they have control over an asset. So we just made that adjustment this year, and like I sort of emphasized, it's more of a balance sheet adjustment than anything. So I don't know if anybody has any questions on that.
Looks like we're good.
All right. So Mitch is gonna jump back to the audit report and finish off that and then run through the statements.
So, back to the auditor report here, leaving off at the responsibilities of management. Management is responsible for the preparation and presentation of these financial statements in accordance with public sector accounting standards. In the preparation of these financial statements, management is responsible for assessing the ability to continue operating and disclosing what is necessary for the engagements. The auditor's responsibility, in other words, our responsibility, is to maintain reasonable assurance over the financial statements that they are free from material misstatement. We provide reasonable assurance, which is a high level of assurance, but not 100%. We will detect the material misstatement. We do not guarantee that we will detect all material misstatements if they exist, but essentially we will do our best to make sure that we try to catch everything that we see throughout our testing. Our job is to also identify and assess risks of material misstatement, obtain sufficient audit evidence for the basis of our opinion, evaluate the appropriateness of the accounting policies, include the appropriateness to management using the going concern basis of accounting based on the audit evidence obtained, evaluate the overall presentation, structure, and content of the financial statements, and we will obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence regarding the financial information. So, to reiterate, it's a clean audit opinion, same as it was last year and the years before. We'd like to draw the attention to the statement of position, which is on the next page, and I'll quickly do a high-level comparative of current year versus prior year. You also see in these financial statements in the top right section here, December 2018, anywhere where that note 1 prior period adjustment affected the financial statements, you will see this restated note just before the note goes into more detail. So going top down here, we can see that cash is up about $34.7 million. And the reason for that is because you can see that we used to have $32 million in short-term investments last year. In 2019, those $32 million in investments matured. And then the other difference is just going to be your excess of revenue over expenses, which we'll see on the next page. Your taxes receivable is up approximately $4.5 million from last year. The amounts are mostly made up from 6 major corporations. Moving down to accounts receivable, it's down about $1.6 million. This is due to $1.7 million from last year being related to the MSI capital grant in the prior year. Moving down to the liabilities, your accounts payable is up $700,000. This is just the timing thing at year end of when you guys are incurring some of your expenses. And deferred revenue is up approximately $1.4 million from last year. This is mostly due to MSI amounts that have not yet been spent. Your non-financial assets, your capital assets are up about $2.6 million. This is going to be a mix of your capital asset additions in the year, your disposals, and your amortization. And your inventory for consumption is down $2.5 million, which is mostly just gravel that was used in here. Do you guys have any questions on the statement of financial position at all?
Looks like we're good.
Perfect. Statement of operations. So when I do this statement of operations, I like to compare 2019 to the 2019 budget and take a look at what it was last year. So from a really high level review, you can kind of see that the revenue is fairly consistent from current year to prior year. There is a slight difference in the budget, and that's mostly due to government transfers from operating, which is down about 2.1 from last year, but it's still pretty consistent with the budget. And then here you'll see that penalties on taxes are up quite a bit, about $1.2 million from the budget and $700,000 from last year. This kind of makes sense considering your taxes receivable is up about $4.5 million from last year as well. Moving down to the expenditures, same thing. Your expenditures are actually pretty bang on from what you guys budgeted, and it's pretty consistent with prior year. The only thing that you'll notice there's not a budgeted amount for is the loss and disposal of capital assets, but it's pretty consistent from prior year. And then here we see your excess of revenue over expenditures. You had about $4.3 million in revenue over your expenses in the current year. So your accumulated surplus has increased from about $167.7 million to $172 million at the end of 2019. Any questions on the statement of operations?
Looks like we're good.
Making it easy for me. I like it. It's fine. The statement of change for net financial assets. So here we just start from our excess of revenue over expenditures. This comes from our statement of operations. So the $4.3 million, then the additions of your capital assets in the year of 9.4, and then you take your amortization of your capital assets of 5.8, add in your loss on sale TCA, and then your proceed amounts that you got from your disposals of capital assets of $831,000. Moving down to the change in prepaids from last year, about $67,000. Then your purchase inventory for consumption, which is mostly gravel, and then your use of inventory for consumption, which is mostly gravel. So your net change in net financial assets for the year is $3.1 million. So your net financial assets at the end of the year have increased by about $3 million, 3.1. There's no questions, just going to jump down to the statement of cash flows. So once again, we start with the excessive revenue over expenditures. Once again, it's pulls from your statement of operations. We then like to add back our non-cash items, which is our amortization and our loss on disposal of TCA. And then we're going to have our balance sheet changes from current year to prior year. So if it's, for the assets, if it's up from the prior year, the value is going to be negative. For the liabilities, if it's an increase in prior year, it's positive. So from here, we can see that we had a change in taxes receivable where it went up about $4.5 million. Accounts receivable went down 1.5. Prepaid expenses, 67. All the way down, inventory for consumption is just the net change in your overall inventory. Moving down to your capital transactions, you purchased $9.4 million of capital assets. You made about $831 through proceeds when you dispose of capital assets. And then moving to the investment transactions, the $32 million is just the maturity of your GICs in the year. And your total net change in cash is $34.7 million. So at the end of the year, you're sitting at $51.7 million, and of that $51.7 million, you have approximately 3.1 of that, which is currently restricted for use. Any questions? Okay. I'm gonna go to the change in accumulated surplus, which is on page 20 here, page 18 at the bottom. But we see that the total reserves at the end of the year are about $52.1 million. Your net financial assets is about 53.4. So currently your reserves are fully funded. So the Kneehill County is sitting in a good financial position as at the end of 2019. Moving down to the debt limits, which is on page 24. We can see, so the total debt limit is a guideline set out by Municipal Affairs. It's just a calculation, essentially taking your total revenue and multiplying it by 1.5, which gets you your total debt amount. And then it gets your revenue times 1.25 gets you your debt servicing limit. So as at the end of December 31st, 2019, your total debt limit is approximately $46 million that you could, in theory, get if you needed additional cash flow to help fund some of your projects. So that's kind of my general spiel for the financial statements. I do have a 5-year comparative that I would like to go over. But before I go to the 5-year, kind of want to open the floor if you guys have any questions at all regarding the financial statements.
Hey Mitch, maybe go through note 24 for the budget reconciliation as well.
Yeah, sure. So here we kind of take the total revenue versus what you guys have budgeted for in the year. So we have the actual and the budget. So going down, the total revenue in the year is $31 million. You guys have budgeted essentially 30.9, so it's really close to what you guys have budgeted in the year. Going down the expense side of things. Once again, when we were going over it, it's pretty big on to what you guys budgeted in the year. And then that change, you guys were within $100,000 of the total change of excessive revenue over expenditures in the year. Going down to the reconciling items, proceeds on disposal, you guys had budgeted at about $1 million, is about 831, so that was pretty close as well. Capital expenditures are significantly down from what was estimated at 22.7 million to 9.4 million. Purchase of gravel, 408 versus what was actually about in the year of 1.2. And then transfers of about 12.1 versus 3.2. And these are the non-cash items that we add back, and at the end of the day, we can see the net revenue over expenditures balances out, because there was that road transfer adjustment that you guys did for about $2.1 million. Any questions?
Looks like we're good.
Okay, gonna move to the 5-year analysis. Everybody see that okay?
What page you on?
So this isn't in your package, I don't believe. Hopefully you guys can see my screen.
Can see it, we just can't read it.
It's pretty small.
Alright, so here going from 2019, 2018, 2017, 16, 15, kind of compare your total revenue across the board. Total revenue for the year is about $31 million, which is pretty consistent. Sorry, I'm gonna find out a way to do this. I know, this is go-to meeting stuff in your guys' way. Sorry. So the total revenue for the year is pretty consistent from what it's been for the past 5 years. There's no significant changes. The biggest dip was in 2016, where you had $28 million in revenue, but overall, your net municipal taxes, transfers for operating, sales, rental revenue, everything's fairly consistent. There's slight fluctuations with investment income because you guys had a lot more in your GICs in the year, which is a significant bump up for the past 2 years. Penalties and costs of taxes are up because your taxes receivable were up about $4.5 million. But ultimately, there's no surprises here. Everything's pretty consistent from a revenue perspective. Even going down to the expense side, we can kind of see that the expenses are relatively consistent as well. No significant changes. Transportation being the biggest value has remained pretty steady throughout the past 5 years. Same with administration, it's all around $5 million. And there's not even a $1 million fluctuation dating from 2019 all the way to 2015. Your total excessive revenue over expenditures over the past 5 years has been about $4 million. In 2017, you had a little bit of a blip, and where you guys had slightly more. And that's just due to your transportation being less by about $2 million in the year. And then here we can kind of see that we had a little bit more in expenses in 2016, which caused the revenue over expenses to be a little bit less than it was historically. So the accumulated surplus at the end of the year, you can see it's kind of growing every single year, which is a good sign, which means that you guys aren't, I guess, you guys are doing great, essentially. So you're going from 151 to 155, 162. So you guys are always increasing your accumulated surplus year over year. So the financial position here as well. just going current year to prior year, we can see that your asset position is getting stronger every year. And your debt position is remaining between that 3.5 million to the 9.5. So the total net financial assets is staying roughly around the 118.6 million. So you kind of have a range of about 117 million to the upper 118 million dollars for your net financial assets. Overall, you guys are in a strong position. It's not really much else to really say about it. So, do you guys have any questions regarding the 5 years?
We just kind of always put that 5-year out there just to show sort of consistencies and a little bit of trends, but like Mitch was talking about, there's lots of consistency going on here, strong financial position as well, so it really looks good.
Well, thanks for the comments. The only problem is we're running into revenue not being collected, so does that show up someplace on this statement?
Well, the one thing that's going on, this is as of December right now. You know, obviously with everything going on with COVID and everything like that, there's uncertainty. The one thing we'll have on the statements is a note about the COVID situation and very general uncertainty going forward. So that is, again, the statement is a picture of time in December. So going forward, like we talked about, it's just a very uncertain situation at this point in time, so.
Yep, pretty uncertain, Alan. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Does anyone else have any questions? Councillor Christie.
My question, I guess, the new assessment of the linear tax on the shallow bed methane wells won't show up until next budget, which will be approximately how many dollars? I'm curious, the 35% reduction.
Go ahead, Mr. McKinnon.
Through the REIV, it's approximately 1.9 million.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any questions? Any more to add on the financial statement by either Alan or Mitch? Faye, do you have any questions out there? And no. Okay. Councillor King.
I guess my question is probably directed to you, Bill. We had the 32 million and change in GICs. Those matured. Where are they? They're sitting in our cash position now. Are we reinvesting? What's the plan there?
So again, through the REIV, there was an anomaly in the financial markets during late 2019 where we actually had an inverse yield curve, which meant basically short-term rates were the same as longer-term rates. So we weren't getting any financial advantage of doing longer-term investments. The strategy of the county is to use one financial institution. We're looking at broadening the placement of those investments to attract higher yields in 2020.
Thank you.
Is there any other? Mr. McKinnon.
If there was no other questions, I just, on behalf of council, since I missed the introduction, like to extend my gratitude to Alan and Mitchell for having another non-eventful audit year. And of course, there'll be accolades to staff later on when I do my RFD related to the financial statements.
Thanks, Bill. I saw him smile.
Yeah, thanks
I
very
just
much.
wanted to send my thanks, like Bill, you, Will, and even Mike, you guys are easy to get a hold of and talk to, very timely on your responses, so I'd like to extend my thanks for you guys being so easy to talk to, and yeah, it was a neat year again. Thanks.
It's a very unusual year for us as auditors. Bill and his team made it easy as usual, so it's a great team there at Kneehill. Just goes to show that they really step up to the plate with this whole COVID situation and sort of the whole awkwardness of it all. So gratitude to those guys as well for all the help during the audit.
any questions from council before presentation is complete? Well, it looks like you guys must have done an awesome job too, because we understand it.
Awesome.
All right, well, thank you so much, and
All right.
you guys stay safe out there.
You too. Take care.
Thanks for your time. Bye.
All righty. Okay, I guess our next order of business on the agenda would be 5.2, water wastewater. Welcome, John. And anytime you're ready.
Good morning, Reeve, members of council. This morning, I just wanted to bring some information to you. During our recent inspections for Alberta Environment and Parks, it was noted that we had some administrative loose ends that we needed to tie up. And one of those was to provide the opportunity for the owners and the stakeholders of our water systems to receive, review, understand, and acknowledge the drinking water safety plans that we have in place for all our systems. The drinking water safety plans requirement came into effect for all drinking water systems regulated under the Environmental Protection Enhancement Act on December 31st, 2013. Excuse me. The Drinking Water Safety Plan is a risk assessment tool that identifies and documents specific risks related to source, the treatment, the network, and the customer components of a waterworks system. Kneehill County currently owns and operates 8 systems that are required to complete the Drinking Water Safety Plan. It should be noted that we have 13 individual systems, but 5 of those fall under the umbrella of 2 separate ones, the Kneehill Southern Rural and Sunny Slope. They are the ones that have kind of subsystems underneath them. As well, Kneehill County is a contractor with Aqua 7. We also have to have one for them as well. That's not included in this package, as it's not one that we don't own or control. So, the risks that have been identified through the drinking water safety plans have been mitigated or can be mitigated through financial controls, managerial controls, operational controls, and technical controls. Some examples of mitigating risks have been the installation of standby power generation equipment, reservoir and pump house fencing, alarm upgrades, implementation of asset management programs, directional flushing of water lines in the hamlets, online chlorine analyzers, and many other controls that are practiced. So operationally, you can see that we can control a lot of these risks. That's kind of most of the discussion and background that I have on it. Including your package, I attached all of the drinking water system plans for you to review, to have a look at. If you have any questions, concerns, they're there.
Mean you're not going through all of them?
Would you like me to? Is my voice that nice?
I think we'll let council ask questions if they want.
Sure.
You don't have to go through them. Are
Thank you, Reeve.
there any questions for Mr. McKiernan? So you even got that name right. Councillor Christie.
Just a comment, every time we talk about water, I go home and hug my wells.
Councillor Penner, sorry.
No problem. Just a quick question to do with backup generators. Kneehill South, like the 4 or 5 or whatever, do they have backup generators in those pump houses?
Through the Reeve, Councillor Penner, all of our pump houses and reservoirs have backup generation now.
Mike.
Just one additional note for council and for any of the public that are watching. Mr. McKinnon mentioned that we go through these plans and we look at the risks, and one of the things that feeds from that is when you're going through these drinking water safety plans, they don't, when you see something that comes in as, and it's flagged as a risk, that doesn't mean that it's actually happening out there. What that tells us is that that's something that's most likely to happen, and that's what guides the group in developing their protocols and their code of practice and all that other stuff that ties in so that we can make sure they don't happen. So it is one of the things when you see a plan like this and you see one of ththose ones that's kind of that orangey red color and listed as a 16, that doesn't mean that there's an issue with the system. What it means is that's something that we have to pay attention to so that we can mitigate and avoid that from happening. And that's really what guides a lot of the practices that John and his guys undertake. So I just wanted to make that note for councils as you're looking through there. There's a tendency sometimes to look at it and say, oh geez, all this stuff is happening. But it's not, it's just a risk assessment, and that tells us what we really need to take care of to make sure it doesn't happen. So at the end of the day, when Alberta Environment came in here, they looked at the risks and we looked at this stuff and said, yep, those are risks, but at the end of the day, they said, yep, they're covered and the system's passed their inspection.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. I mean, at least that way you don't end up with a surprise because you know that there's a possibility that it'll happen, probably won't, but if you don't even think about it, when it happens, then you're kind of behind the 8 ball, so thank you very much for keeping that in the forefront. Councillor Penner.
It was actually nice to see the report and that there's not that many reds. There's a couple of reds, but I mean, there are things you're dealing with, but I think overall, I think you have a very well-run department.
Thank you. To the Reeve, when you do see those reds, just a little bit on the mics, a little bit, when you're dealing with water, you're dealing with health, right? So if something does happen, when you look at the consequences of something happen, it could be high, right? And that's where the risk gets, the likelihood is usually low, right? Very low. But if it ever did, then that's where the overall risk score gets a little heightened, just because it's health related.
Are there any other questions from council for Mr. McKiernan? Faye, do you have any questions? No? Okay. Councillor Penner.
This is just for my own information, going forwards, who knows when, but the difference between and I don't understand these, the Blue Brute and the SDR pipes, is one better than the other, or?
Well, the HDP pipe is kind of the more common pipe now. That's what we use for most of our rural systems. In hamlets, a while ago, Blue Brute is basically the PVC pipe that you see, the basically plastic rigid pipe throughout. If one is better than the other, HDP is probably a more flexible pipe for longer runs, whereas Blue Brute it's in the ground, so it's not going to be affected by any ultraviolet rays and stuff like that. So they both do their job well.
For about 75 years. Is there any other questions? Well, doesn't look like it, John, so thank you very much for the report. Can see you were busy in the office for a while. Would anyone care to make a motion to receive for information John's report? Councillor King.
I'd make the motion that council receive for information the drinking water safety plans for Kneehill County water systems as presented.
Thank you. We have a motion before us. Call the question. All those in favor to receive for information, and that is unanimous. Thanks, John. Did a great job. Okay, our next agenda item will be 6.1, financial statement. And anytime you're ready, Bill. Welcome back. We've missed you.
So Sorry, better turn on my mic. Through the Reeve, again, the auditors presented the financial statements, and I'd just like to highlight some of the other financial processes council has put in place to add value to the financial statements, but more importantly, provide, as council's aware, the financial statements come once a year. Well, what happens during the balance of the year? So that's what the intent of the report is to focus on. I will touch on a couple items that were in the financial statements that council had specific questions on. But overall, we follow the standards as set out in the public sector handbook of the Canadian Institute of Chartered Accountants and the like, and that's what's required under the MGA. The MGA defaults to the Accounting Standards Board for the principles and practices related to financial management for municipalities in terms of financial statements. In other places, it's silent and it allows council the flexibility to adopt prudent financial practices as they see fit. That being said, the financial statements are there, and the most important thing the auditors probably explained was they've given an unqualified opinion on the statements, which basically means, in their opinion, the financial statements represent fairly and accurately all the financial transactions and cash flows related to the municipality for the year ending 2019. In addition to that, council receives at a minimum various reports during the course of the year. Some of these deal with variance reports, some of them deal with capital expenditure reports, and that's where the sort of anomaly in reporting differentials are between the financial statements. So the financial statements are prepared on a consolidated basis. So it includes the operating budget, the capital budget, the reserve funds, and it's all thrown into one big ball. During the course of the year, administration reports to council specifically on the operating budget, specifically on the capital expenditures, and provides various other financial supplementary information during the course of the year. That does assist council in managing and seeing trends in the financial statements, and I was pleased to see the auditor do that 5-year trend, because from a financial statement perspective, that's really where council's focus should be, is where's the municipality trending. But I will touch on 2 specific items that council did raise. One was the Reeve mentioned the taxes. So the financial statements do show an increase in taxes. If you refer to page page 182 of the council package, the third item down on their financial assets is taxes receivable. So it is showing an increase from 218 of approximately 2.7 million to 7.2 million, which on face value looks like a huge spike in the outstanding taxes. Included in there are approximately 3.5 million taxes of commercial, non-residential accounts that council has agreed to deferral agreements. So if you net that 3.5 million out, both those organizations that have deferral agreements are current on their payment schedule. So it's not as bleak picture as it appears at the end of 2019. So just for council's information. However, there will be ongoing pressure, obviously, in 2020, 2021 because of the current gas and oil pricing. The additional question was on the investment rates, and I'd just like to assure council and reaffirm the council that we're not a residential consumer in terms of the banking industry. So we do have special agreements with the bank that allow us and guarantee us significantly higher interest rates than the consumer would get at the banks. So we have what's termed an overnight rate. So even if we're not doing active investments, we get a return based on prime. So at a minimum, we're always getting, in this current environment, at a minimum, we're always getting roughly 2 to 2.25% return on our investments. And as I alluded to, there are other financial institutions where we could get a better rate. So we are looking at spreading the portfolio out to maximize the rate for the county. So that being said, that's the highlights, excuse me, that's the highlights of the RFD related to the financial statements. And as I alluded to when I was giving accolades to the auditors, I'd just like to extend my appreciation to staff, mainly Will Wolf, who coordinates the year-end audit, and numerous other staff that, you know, prepare the multitude of schedules that are basically 2 or 3 binders high that are passed on to the auditor for them to review the working papers that staff have pulled together.
Well, thanks, Bill. Express our high regard for your financial staff too. It does make things easier when everything goes smooth. Are there any questions from council for Mr. McKinnon? Looks like we're doing good. We do have a motion to accept a financial audited statement. If someone would like, Councillor Christie.
I'll make the motion to accept the 2019 audited financial statement as presented.
Okay, we have a motion before us. Is there any discussion to that motion prior to calling the question? Councillor Christie.
As my comment would be, when you look at other institutions, the principal is always guaranteed, like it's never at risk.
Through the REIV, there are regulations through the province that restrict the magnitude and placement of investments. Generally, it has, if it's GICs and the like, it has to be guaranteed. But to give you an example, various province, in terms of the financial institutions, besides what's provided through Canadian Deposit Insurance, each province provides protection themselves. So various provinces provide different levels of protection of investments in financial institutions. So for instance, financial institutions in BC, the BC government guarantees 100% with no restrictions on the aggregate amount that they will cover. Various other provinces, you know, only cover the first X number of dollars. So there's variations, and of course we will be following all the regs required under the Municipal Government Act.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. We have a motion before us. All those in favor to accept the 2019 audited financial statement as presented? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is 8.1, the county COVID operations report. And that is being presented by oh, come on, it's in here. Mike?
Yes.
Sorry.
So through you, Mr. Reeve, we wanted to provide council with an update on some of the stuff that the county was doing, obviously during the COVID pandemic that we're dealing with. Not all businesses is normal, but we wanted to give council kind of an update or a glimpse on some of the activities that we were undertaking during the pandemic. Particularly given there may be questions as you know, as the doors have been closed, what is still going on behind the doors, those sorts of things. So we wanted to take council through a number of areas. As we're coming through, we have in transportation and environment, as this is in the report there, the main functions that those departments undertake are still continuing. So we're still maintaining water systems, we're still doing the regulatory testing, still doing the project construction for Churchill. In terms of roads, council I'm sure has seen crews out there fixing hot spots. Greater maintenance has started as a little while ago, as is
You faded out there, Mike.
All right, it looks like this microphone likes me better, so we'll try there. So a lot of the major functions that are taking place out in the field are still continuing. Even now, we have crews out working on spots on different roads, looking at different maintenance, graveling projects, those sorts of things. So those have largely continued. So we haven't lost much of any progress in those areas. In agricultural services, there've been a bit of an up and down for them, because when we started this, we scaled back on a number of seasonals and things like that, just because it looked like some of the services might not be continued. Once the province came out with some of their essential lists, or their reopening strategy, that of course changed some of the functions that were going on there. So a number of the behind the scenes work that was going on got supplemented with some of the reopening strategies. So as we've alerted council, the county's recreation sites like Orkney and Horseshoe Canyon are looking to open before the long weekend here. So putting that type of planning in place, as well as looking at reopening campgrounds under provincial guidelines, probably at the start of June. So that getting those sites ready, getting everything done there. We did bring on some more seasonal. So where we had scaled back initially, we haven't gone to the county's full complement of seasonals, but we have increased the number that we were originally looking at just a short while ago, because of some of the reopening abilities that we've had. So a lot of those projects are still continuing, as is development of the Horseshoe Canyon Public Engagement Plan, which is of course part of a direction from council from a little while ago in terms of what the future of that site might hold. So with that, we're also able to bring on the 2% strychnine sales, which of course sold out right away. We are taking a list of those interested in case we can get more product, although that looks doubtful in terms of what's our ability to gain more product from its manufacturer. But we are watching that. As well, the normal grant reporting and application has been taken care of. So it is one of those things we're waiting to see back on. We're not sure that the funding that we've received in the past is what we're going to receive in the future. And that's not just relative to Kneehill, that's across the board. And looking at, again, waiting for the province to come out with information around the campsites or the campgrounds or day use areas that they're looking for different partners to help manage on. So we can bring a discussion back to council on that front. And we were expecting that information to be released at the beginning of May, and then got word from the province that it would be the end of May, beginning of June. So we're hoping that we get some information at that point that we can bring back to you guys to actually build a discussion on. Within administration and communications, so we've continued promoting regular county business. So we've put out communications has been busy. Working on a number of communications to go out to the public, keeping them advised. There's a lot of internal communications that are taking place, whether that's notices to staff. We've done a couple of videos in-house as well, just in terms of alerting staff to things that we're doing or what we're looking forward to, what we hope can happen in the future. Although with the pandemic, there's no guarantees of anything. So we're trying to watch what we can do and what's appropriate to do. We do have communications such as the live tweeting of council meetings has continued. That's just being done remotely now, but that's gone relatively uninterrupted. And on top of you have the normal county business and then communications, like I just alluded to. I'm also heavily involved in the Emergency Coordination Center, so they're the communication wing of that agency. So we've wanted to take some, while we've got this going on, is as well to take some time to update some of our forms and templates, to do some of the internal rebranding or some of that admin work that goes along with the new logo, that goes along with old forms that maybe haven't been looked at in a while, and bringing those up to speed. development of new templates, which really what that means is we're looking at some of our processes. So rather than having different communications go out from different areas of the organization, having them bottlenecked, because there's just that many people going to one person, is putting processes or templates in place where there's sort of pre-approvals in place. So the agencies or the entities within the county that are looking to communicate have basically a pre-scripted form. It's already improved. They fill in a couple pieces of information and it's good to go. So it just creates efficiencies down the road. And so that requires looking at some of those processes or doing some of those updates. And so we've been working on that as well. The front desk is still answering calls and emails from the public, but with the doors being closed and obviously not having the walk-in traffic, we've resourced those staff to take on our digital filing system. So when we move to an electronic filing system, one of the processes that has to occur is all of the hard files, like all the paper that's in the back room, gets digitized and then put into the system. And that had really been just kind of an off to the side project, or you do a little bit here, do a little bit there when the time arises. We've been able to resource some of the staff at the front without the walk-in traffic to go towards that program. So while we've been doing this, there's I think almost 16,000 pages worth of work that we've been able to digitize and put in there. So Natalie and Chaseley at the front are not they're not sitting there waiting for a call to come in. They're actually focusing on some of these other projects, which has actually been as much as you can take a positive from the pandemic. Something like that is a positive, because what that does is that we don't need to come back to you guys in the future and say, hey, we'd like to hire somebody temporarily to just work on this project or to do that. So we've been able to create that time and take on some of those projects to get them done. And even with that much scanned in, there's far more than that left to go. So there's no shortage of trying to move some of those things along. As well within this broad realm is information management has been able to maintain normal troubleshooting activities, and that's no small feat when we have the number of staff we do working remotely. So getting that set up, our meetings, even just the Zoom, our ECC meetings are being done remotely. We have a number of other meetings that we've been able to facilitate, whether that's the Kneehill Regional Partnership Steering Committee or Aqua 7. IT is playing a role in helping make sure that all of those are running as they should. So there's a normal activities and say plus given the nature of how we're operating. And as well as working with communications and progressing with cleanup and organization of the county's shared network drives. So that project, it's easy to say we're doing some file cleanup and kind of put it to the side like that. It's a much bigger project than that. So what we're looking at is the way that our filing has taken place on the shared server that administration uses, and there's a little bit, some of the areas in the past are not intuitive. Some of the old files haven't been cleaned up. So in this opportunity now, not just IT, but a group of staff are reorganizing that entire drive so it's intuitive, the filing system makes sense. We can find documents a lot easier and things like that. So it's one of those things that you kind of pick away at little by little over the time, but now we've had the ability to look at it a bit more concertedly and move that along. In the mapping area, we're doing doing a lot of our mapping remotely, but still working on a number of projects are coming through. So that's I've got a list in the item there, but working on some different evacuation maps, updating information in our GIS system, and as well as doing field inspection stuff, and now taking that data from what's done out in the field and making sure that it does get into our GIS and mapping system so that we can actually utilize that data going forward. So a lot of those are regular functions. A lot of those are things that are advancing projects in other departments, but they're continuing on. Under Protective Services, so Protective Services is a main entity looking after the Emergency Coordination Center. So again, that the ECC is what the mechanism that the county is using to monitor the pandemic, to make recommendations to the broader county There's been a lot of work on there, especially as we get ready for potentially reopening. So that's sourcing different PPE, making sure that, in the near future, if you come into the lobby here, you will see some plexiglass barriers, as you've probably seen in other businesses and things like that. Making sure that we have some of those in place so that if the public does come in by appointment, that we have some sort of physical barrier and those sorts of things. So throughout this entire thing, Protective Services has been doing a great job looking after that side of things. As well, the rural patrols by the peace officers are continuing, and we've actually increased the number of kilometers that they've been able to travel, and they're still helping out, whether it's other agencies like the RCMP, doing bylaw enforcement for us and our urban partners. All those functions have continued. Within planning is we do continue to receive applications. So when this thing started, we weren't quite sure how that was going to play out, if we'd still see those or not, and we are. One thing about the chart that I've put the numbers in there is the 2019 totals are the yearly totals. So throughout 2019, we saw 27 subdivisions. The 2020 totals are year to date. So at this point in the year, we're up to not quite half of what we saw all of last year. So what that tells us is that the number of permits and things coming in have been relatively consistent, and we are expecting an uptick in some of those areas. So when you look at safety codes and you see the difference there, generally those permits will start coming in once people actually start building and constructing things. And of course, we're coming into that season now. So we wouldn't expect that to necessarily be consistent throughout the year, but we would expect that as people get moving on things in the summer months to see an increase in those. So I think that's another thing that even working remotely, that our planning staff has been able to continue to facilitate those developments. And what we're seeing from the public is that those applications are still coming in. So it doesn't appear like they've slowed down much at all. So that again is a little positive for both us, and if people are looking at development, then that's hopefully a positive out there as well. The other thing to mention, again, it's one of these projects behind the scenes that planning is working on. One of their databases is looking at, again, it's for future efficiencies and what we're going on. So they've been plugging away on that, in addition to keeping up with the permits and things that we're seeing. And so from their perspective, being able to pull up a database and look at the development history of a property without having to go really searching for it, they've got it at their fingertips. They're starting to put some of that stuff together, or complete that stuff. Corporate services, so again, a lot of the normal functions. Just because we're in the pandemic, it doesn't mean that the normal day-to-day accounting functions, the capital asset management, any of that stuff, it's still the same. As you just saw, even while we're in this, we were able to facilitate the year-end audit remotely. So that was a lot of good work that our corporate services team did with our auditors to figure out how to go about that, to make sure that they could get the information they needed, to make sure that we were providing that timely, and with a culmination of that effort, that we were able to present those to you today. As well, there's a number of been able to track and monitor COVID-related issues and develop business continuity plans. So this was the business continuity plans are those ones that we look at, that if we lose a number of staff, what services are going to be scaled back? How are we going to continue to provide essential and critical services? Figuring those things out ahead of time so that if they do happen to occur, we have a plan in place to keep going. Or at least we know which things we're going to drop off the service list so that we can maintain other services and resources. So all of the organization undertook that, but with a lot of our processes, that there was a heavy component of that in corporate services as well, especially when we're dealing with things, making sure that we can pay our invoices, making sure that we can pay our staff, making sure that we can do the things that need to be doing to keep the finances rolling throughout the organization. So with that, the group continues to develop web content and work on long-range financial plans. So council will see that coming in the near future. Is under regulation. We have a budget. We still need to pass multi-year operational and capital plans. So those are still coming council's direction and still being put together and worked on. There are some challenges in there that we're going to be seeing, and that's kind of moving off COVID. Is you in the financial statements, you already alluded to the shallow gas and the impact that that's had on our finances. With the price of oil and where that's going, it's not going to make things better. So as we go forward into the future, there's going to be some challenges that we're facing. So we're starting to look at those or see what those might mean, because what we're seeing when wells get shut in or when productivity is down is it's not just shallow gas, but we're going to see probably decreased assessment in most areas across the board within industry, which of course is going to impact the tax, not just the tax amount, but the tax split and all those sorts of things. So we're trying to look at those long-term plans so that we can make good recommendations to you guys based on what we think is going to happen in the future. But there will be some challenges. There will be some challenging times ahead of us. So we're working through that process and with the managers to start to look at ways as how to address those. So with the web content and some peer reviews. So in looking at some of the reviews as an example, part of meeting those challenges and like we did last year is looking at areas that we can be more efficient or that we can cut. Starting to look at, continuing to look at those areas and saying, you know, is there a way that, as an example, we're assessing the benefit plan. You know, is there a way that we can provide the same plan at lower cost to the county? We think there might be, and we're exploring that now. And so that's where, again, it's one of those things that we do from time to time, but we're still gathering that data to see if our thoughts are accurate on that. And of course, if they will, then it's one area that we can come back and say, hey, this is an area that we can lower expenditures in. Additionally, some other staff in the area, notably our assessment and taxation group, has been able to continue working on another database isn't the right word, but put together information that, again, when we have multiple people owning multiple properties, updating contact information, things like that, just things that make that area more efficient and smooth running, has been able to put a focus onto amalgamating some of those contacts or some of those files, so that we don't have, say, separate contacts for a husband and wife who are living in the same house on the same property. We can now put those together, right? So that's again one of those projects that you kind of pick away at, but we've been able to actually put a lot more focus on it now and start to do things like that. So there is still work occurring. And so we wanted to give council an update on that. We know that there's public tuning in. We wanted to give them an update as well. And of course, as we put out, we are looking at the county's relaunch strategy. So relaunch is maybe a bit of an overblown term, because as we've seen, most of our services have continued uninterrupted. We did see temporary interruptions to some of them, like the strychnine sales at the beginning, but we were able to bring that back. And yeah, we're also taking the time throughout this to assess some of the services that are still operating, but maybe not at their full capacity, and so that we can bring those back for some discussion later on. And you know, as an example, if we do less mowing or less brushing, and that doesn't seem to be a concern of the public, that might be an area that we can come back to you in the budget and say, hey, maybe we don't need to do this as often as we have in the past, and we can save a bit of money by doing that. So staff is out there looking at different, I hesitate to use the word positives throughout this pandemic, but there are some positives or some ability for us to assess some things that we say, hey, you know, maybe this wasn't as important as we thought it was, and there might be an area in here that we can save a bit of time and money on as we go forward. So there's things like that we're watching as well. And again, depending on the outcome of those, we'll come back. Our recommendation that we come back with will depend on what we see coming out of those. With that, we are looking at next week at opening the county on an appointment-only basis. So we are still going to attempt to do as much as we can with over phone, over email, to prevent those contacts. The appointment basis will allow us to carry on some functions that have sort of been on pause. One of the examples of that, as I mentioned last council meeting to you, that there wasn't really a good process in terms of for some of our planning documents where you need a signature and you need that signature witnessed in terms of getting that. That's the type of thing that by appointment we'd be able to facilitate now. So that's an example of something that would fit into that mold. But where we can, we'll still try to provide that service via email or telephone. With staff, our field staff have they've continued on, I think, exceptionally well in terms of the functions that they're doing, and they've done that with a lot of different isolation protocols in place. So even things like staggering when their lunch hours and breaks are, so we can limit the number of people in the staff room, limiting where they're starting in the morning. Different entities are reporting to different areas of the shop or different buildings there for their mornings. So we're trying to prevent those mass gatherings, right? A lot of the admin staff has been working from home. It is the guidance of the province that continue as much as possible. Dr. Hinshaw has put that out there that they would like to see work from home as much as possible, even given the reopening of a number of entities. So we're going to continue that, and part of that process is, again, social distancing and limiting the number of people physically here. What we don't want to see is, while we've been able to pretty much maintain county services so far, what we don't want to see is an influx of staff back into this building. One person gets sick and now we're down a whole bunch of staff and we have to retract some of those services because we don't have the resources. So we're trying to do on two fronts. We're trying to make sure we can keep staff safe and to keep them safe in such a way that we can continue to provide all the services that we're still providing. And so that's part of, as we're looking at the relaunch and looking at moving in phases, that we're operating on as well. But again, the gist of the report is we wanted to give council an update that we are still continuing almost all of our services. Some of the ones that we had to pause are coming back online shortly, such as rec sites and campgrounds. And there's a number of other projects and work functions that we've been able to take on or redeploy staff towards to push those things forward. With that, that's my report, and if council has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I guess going back to the campgrounds and our Orkney Lookout and Horseshoe Canyon, we are still providing not washroom or outhouse services there, but we are still keeping the sites clean.
We're trying to keep them clean. It's a battle sometimes.
Yeah.
We've got protocols in place for picking up garbage. We have been out at Horseshoe as an example dealing with garbage, but we are finding that all the people who have still been using Horseshoe, regardless of it being closed, there's a lot of good people using it, but we've also found there's a number of people who are not using the garbage facilities provided. And of course, that's something that our staff has to deal with and that we have to put protocols in place, because now they're going around not just picking up the bins, but there's other things there, right? Staff has been out there regularly to check on the site. I mean, there's some maintenance and sloughing issues that we're also watching and trying to deal with as well. I didn't mention those in the report, but they're there. So we will have signage up indicating that, and part of the messaging is that, even though the canyon is still open and people can go there, the facilities that they'd normally expect, such as the washrooms, are not going to be similar to provincial rec sites and campgrounds. They're not going to be open. So hopefully people take note of that. With it being officially open, we do hope that we stop seeing people rip down the signage or the notifications that we're putting up. But it's been an issue that we've noticed as well. So again, it's just one more thing that we're dealing with. With campgrounds, when they reopen in early June, hopefully, the province did just put out a number of guidelines around private and municipal campgrounds. So those actually we received those yesterday. So a number of those things will be in place. So while, say, Keevers Lake will be open, it's likely that not all of the sites will be open. People will be limited to one unit per site. some of the communal features that, like the bathrooms, if there's playgrounds in any of the campgrounds, those types of things won't be open or available. And that's, again, in line with provincial guidelines and what they're doing to there. So essentially, campers will need to be fully contained within their own units. So they will be open, but again, following those provincial guidelines. The other thing that we're looking at doing is in our reservation system, as an example, is moving the campgrounds to a cashless system. So meaning that if you are going to attend the campsite, that you're making a reservation online, which of course you're paying for that reservation online. So that again limits well, there's two things. It limits the cash on site, and with that limits the handling of cash. So that again has been it's a little change from what we've been doing, but it is a direction we've kind of been looking at for a while. This is just kind of given a bigger push to look at it. So there's a number of those things that staff are sorting out.
Thanks, Mike. Is there any questions for Mike from council? Yeah, doesn't look like it, Mike.
Thank you.
Would someone care to make a motion to receive for information? Councillor Penner.
I'd make the motion that council accept the report on the council's operations during COVID-19 pandemic for information as presented.
Thank you. We have a motion before us. Call the question. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Our next order of business would be number 11, council follow-up action list. Any questions for Mike on that? Councillor King.
I'd make the motion that council receive the council follow-up action list for information.
Thank you. Motion's been made to receive for information. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thanks, Faye. Okay, it's 9:43. We will take a recess, come back for our public hearing at 10. Thanks, everyone. Back, everyone. It is 10 a.m. We have a public hearing for bylaw, bylaw 1817, Town of Drumheller, Kneehill County, Intermunicipal Development Plan. I would call for a motion. Yes, yes, Councillor King.
Public hearing?
Yes, to be opened at 10 a.m.
So moved.
All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Have a few announcements. Before the COVID-19 outbreak, this would have been the time where I would have asked anyone who wanted to speak for or against the proposed bylaw to register their names on the appropriate speakers lists. However, during the COVID-19 outbreak, new ministerial orders have been applied to allow meetings to be held in a manner which supports social distancing recommendations from the Chief Medical Officer of Health. During the COVID-19 health emergency, any person who claims they are affected by the proposed bylaw are advised by advertising means to make written submissions before the hearing. I would like to introduce the members of council at this time, starting on my far right.
Jim Hugo. Glenn Keever.
Ken King?
Morning, Jerry Whitstock.
Debbie Penner?
Wade Christie?
And on video conferencing, we have Councillor Fay McGee. And also seated with council. Morning. And also seated with council is our CAO, Mr. Mike Hogan. I will now outline the meeting process. I will now review the process for you. Individuals who have submitted letters will be read out loud during the public hearing. Public participation during the public hearing can be done by emailing planning.department@kneehillcounty.com. Any emails received during the public hearing will be considered before the second reading, which will be done later on during the regular council meeting under agenda item 9.1. All emails received after the public hearing has been closed will not be considered. In order of presentations to be made to council today will be: first, administration shall present an overview and summary regarding the proposed bylaw. Secondly, the applicant's presentation will be read by administration. Third, the chair shall open the floor to presentations from the public who are in favor of the proposed bylaw. Administration will come forward and read those written submissions. Fourthly, the chair shall open the floor to presentations from the public who are opposed to the public bylaw. There again, administration will come forward and read the written submissions. I will now ask our planning and development department to come forward to make their presentations. Welcome, Ms. Hazelton, and anytime you are ready.
Good morning, Mr. Reed, members of council. Our very last public hearing for IDPs. So this has been a long process and we're finally getting to the end of it here. So this is with the town of Drumheller. Originally, we had scheduled this public hearing prior to right when COVID was hitting. So we did wind up postponing it. So we've re-advertised for the new date. So these are the dates that we've advertised and where. So just so you're aware, everything's been done appropriately. Again, under the Municipal Government Act, the Bill 25 did replace the must, that if two municipalities agree that they don't need one, we don't have to have one. So we do have a couple of those that won't be happening. But in this case, they are an urban. So we did feel that it was necessary to continue with this process. So again, we're talking about future land use, future development, transportation, intermunicipal infrastructure, any programs that relate to physical, social, economic development, environmental matters, which is a big one in this area because it's a lot of badlands, intermunicipal services and facilities, and then anything else that council would consider necessary to be putting in this document. A portion of this also must address your conflict resolution, a procedure that how you're going to amend or potentially repeal the plan, and then anything relating to the administration of the plan. And again, Bill 25 did change how this looks, that if something is in the intermunicipal collaboration framework, it doesn't have to be in the intermunicipal development plan as well. So one or the other on some of these things. So the objectives in this plan particularly are, again, it's really about collaboration when you're developing lands in that plan area, open communication between the municipalities and the public and interested stakeholders. It promotes respect for each other's jurisdictional autonomy and integrity, provides a framework for provision of services and infrastructure for that joint planning area that demonstrates an equitable, efficient, and proactive approach. And it is a guide to collaboratively plan for lands within that area that will promote opportunities for residential, commercial, industrial, and economic development. Both the municipalities maintain jurisdiction. Applications that are received are evaluated against each municipality's municipal development plan, as well as any non-statutory plans, which would be your land use bylaw. Notifications will be done by both municipalities for applications received in the subject lands, and then municipalities do agree to share ownership information and mailing addresses just for circulation purposes only. We want to ensure the development grows in a sustainable and responsible manner, and that there is a coordinated approach to development when we are on these borderlands. And again, it's about really minimizing those land use conflicts and outlining a process for disputes if they do arise. It also provides landowners with greater certainty of potential land use and future development within the plan area. So the plan area itself, you'll see on the map that we have used the highway as the split because Drumheller borders so many municipalities. We want to ensure that we don't have overlapping lands. And so we have split ours at the highway there, and you will see how those lands fall out. Lands within the plan area, you will see what's highlighted in green are predominantly agricultural lands. So even within the town of Drumheller, they have a lot of agricultural lands. Other land uses are institutional, industrial, and residential. You'll see we have a little tiny country residential, that's the little orange piece up towards the top. That's probably, I think, the only thing on our side that would be different. And then Drumheller would have some unique zonings in theirs. Minimal residential and acreage development has occurred on our side, and topography is a large indicator of what you can and can't do there. Soil classifications, as you will see, there is some of everything, but as typical in the Badlands area, the soil profile is a level 7, so not very conducive to a lot of things. But you will see that there's certainly some exceptional farmland in close proximity. Agriculture is going to continue to be the primary use of land in the plan area. Again, we saw the variety of soil classifications. And then both municipalities shall respect the right of agricultural operators to pursue normal activities associated with their operation without interference based on a development that could take place. Tourism and recreation. So under this plan, we want to ensure tourism and recreational related development continues to thrive and occurs in a harmonious and efficient manner with the natural landscape. The plan area contains an industrial area located west of Highway 9 along Highway 575. This area is mainly built out with light industrial land uses with some vacant undeveloped areas for future growth. The Drumheller Institution with medium and minimal security facilities is a major employer in the region. And then you have Dinosaur Downs Speedway, which includes a dirt racetrack and motocross, and they host numerous racing events throughout the year. Regarding the servicing and infrastructure, coordinate infrastructure and services between both municipalities can lead to greater efficiency and cost savings. It is feasible here for us to share servicing depending on where development would occur. We've already provided some servicing to some of their residents, and the opportunities there's certainly for them to go the other way as well. When it comes to the historical and environmental plan, it might be hard to pick up in here, but there's really no level 1 and 2, which was surprising to me when we pulled that information. So you're looking at historical, mostly for paleontological reasons, level 3, 4, and 5. in this plan area, so you will see kind of where that falls. The plan area, as we know, is rich in cultural, archaeological, and paleontological history and artifacts. The area has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples for thousands of years and is located within Treaty 7, signed by the Government of Canada and 5 First Nations. Much of the eastern portion of the plan area boundary runs along the edge of the Red Deer River and includes important riparian areas within the Red Deer River Basin. The eastern border follows the Rosebud River, and riparian areas provide a wide range of ecological functions and vital landscape. Both municipalities are committed to protecting and preserving the environment. Here's the oil and gas mapping that is within the plan area. There is some into Drumheller, but the majority of it would fall on our side of the border. Resource extraction, all of those things need to occur in a manner that's compatible with adjacent land uses and minimizes offsite impacts. So those are things too that will be considered if there is significant development in that area. The plan area itself is bisected by Highway 9 in the middle going north-south and Highway 575 northwest to southeast joining into Highway 10. Topography in the plan area dictates the location of human development, and the creation of new major road networks is very unlikely. Future development will likely be located near existing transportation corridors. Both municipalities, when providing comments to applicants or relevant agencies in regard to applications, we will look to this guide. Again, telecommunications towers is more of a federal entity. It's one of those things that we have some ability to comment in, and definitely they're going to look at airport infrastructure in the area, but we don't have a lot of say in how those come about. The committee itself is designed as an even number of members from each municipality. This is not a decision-making body. They meet as needed and review the plan every 4 years. This is the forum for dialogue, though, for common interest or concerns, and it's also one of the tools that we would use in resolving any conflict. Again, we have a process in place that falls within the document itself. So when it arises, you're going to look at the administration, first of all, then it goes to committee, then council, and then it would go on to mediation or arbitration. So those are the processes, very typical with all of our other ones. A review of these documents was completed in July of 2019. In February, we met again and did some further amendments. We have both scheduled public hearings. Town of Drumheller's has already been held, and they also did adopt this plan at that time. So our expectation is you would consider second and third reading at this meeting as well. And to date, we have not received any letters in favor or in opposition. As you know, this is a new one, so we are going to watch the emails now to see if anybody's providing comment throughout this process. But otherwise, agency comments were included in your package that you have in your council package. Questions?
Okay, does council have any questions for our planner? Looks like not.
Okay.
Administration to come forward and read the applicant's report. As we are the applicant, I believe that's been covered under your planning department report. And you have stated that there are no written submissions in favor of the proposed bylaw?
Correct.
Okay, and none opposed either. So we don't have any email updates at this time to provide council with?
Not yet, no.
Not yet, all righty.
She would text, so no text.
All right, so I now declare the public hearing closed and ask for a motion to go back into regular council meeting. Councillor Kiever.
I move we go back into regular council meeting.
We have a motion before us. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Okay, so we are back in regular council meeting. I think it might be prudent. We do have the disposition of delegate and public hearing business, 9.1. But I think what we'll do is we'll leave that to the end of the meeting. That'll give people time, if they do want to email us, the opportunity to do that prior to us dealing with the public hearing disposition. So our next item on the agenda is our closed session. It is in intergovernmental relations, section 2.1. Would somebody like to move us into closed session? Councillor Penner.
So moved.
All right. Motion's been made to move us into closed session. All those in favor? And that is carried. That's carried. Thank you. public hearing business. Bylaw 1817. Welcome back, Barb.
Thank you. Sorry, we have an RFD here for the town of Drumheller, Kneehill County Intermunicipal Development Plan. We just had the public hearing earlier today. We have not received any additional emails throughout that process. So we're here to just bring this back to you. Most of this we have talked about already through the public hearing. So our recommended motion is that council move second reading of bylaw 1817, and that you also move on to move third reading to adopt this bylaw. And again, I will just remind you that it was passed by Drumheller on March 16th, so it's halfway there.
Thanks, Barb. What's council's wishes? Councilor Christie,
I'll make the motion to move bylaw 1817 on
second reading.
the second reading, yes.
Okay, we have a motion before us to move second reading of bylaw 1817. Is there any discussion prior to the question? Seems not. Call the question. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Fay, sorry, Councilor McGee. Oh, okay, sorry.
I just wanted to be sure you saw my vote. Yeah, that's fine.
Someone care to move third? Councilor King.
I'd make the motion that we give third reading to bylaw 1817 for the town of Drumheller and Kneehill County Intermunicipal Development Plan.
Thank you. We have a motion before us to move third reading of 1817. Any discussion to that motion? I do not see any. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of our agenda. So I will adjourn our council meeting at 11:30. Thank you, everyone.